Good morning, everyone. So, I have a bit of a short story that I would like to share with you guys. And it's not something that has happened to me, but it's something that can happen to us collectively as we move on. So, just imagine this: it's the year 2035, and people don't whisper about going to therapy anymore. They didn't call it a personal day or taking a personal day. What they meant is that they need time for my mind. And instead, they said it plainly and they said it confidently. I'm meeting with my counselor this afternoon, or I'm feeling emotionally overwhelmed, so I'm taking some time to take care of myself. So, in this world, stigma didn't just disappear overnight, it had been slowly replaced. And this is the type of world that we're trying to slowly get to because we don't actually have that type of environment as of right now. We can't always talk about how we're feeling or what's going on with us or if we're feeling down or depressed or we're dealing with anxiety. So, in this world that I'm talking about, that is 10 years later, it began with generations now when teachers started naming emotions in classrooms and taught kids how to sit with sadness, how to name frustration, how to reach out when overwhelmed. Things that we didn't necessarily learn how to do when we were children. And then those kids, they grew up to become adults who didn't fear vulnerability. So they saw strength in saying, I'm not okay. And then the workplaces also evolved as well, along with these newfound adults. So you have places like in downtown Chicago where a woman named Aria walked into her team meeting, and she was the head of product design at a tech firm known as Ken, and she just returned from a short leave for postnatal depression. And her manager welcomed her not with the awkward glances or sidelong pity, but with genuine respect. We're glad to see that you took time that you needed for yourself, he said. We missed your insight, but we're even happier that you're back feeling stronger. And then in another part of the world, in a rural village tucked away in Pakistan's Swat Valley, mental health clinics stood beside medical ones. They weren't in the shadows anymore, but they were on the main road. And a teenage boy named Hassan visited one regularly, talking through grief with a psychologist after losing his grandfather. There's no shame, there's no secrecy. His friends saw the visits as normal. You could even say helpful. But it had become something people it had become something that people did to stay well, rather. Just like eating vegetables or going for a walk. And then you have the transformation of families. So once silent generation of fathers begin telling their sons, I felt like that too. Mothers didn't say be strong as a code for don't cry. They said crying is strong. Talk to me. And then arts and film and music also reflect this same type of shift where popular songs spoke of honesty, of anxiety and hope in the same breath. And film showed protagonists who faced trauma and sought help. It wasn't all just about superheroes who just overcame, but humans who endured. We didn't just sensationalize it, it just was. And then in another area, we have prisons. Once overrun with people suffering from untreated mental illness, had been replaced by expansive mental health recovery centers. People were diverted into healing, not punishment. Judges often begin sentencing not with time served, but support required. And faith spaces open wide, where you have imams and pastors and rabbis and monks spoke openly about mental wellness as part of spiritual health. They study psychology not as a threat to theology, but as a complement. They weave neurodiversity and compassion into sermons, and support groups met in mosques and churches without fear of being judged. It's not necessarily like that now, where you have to have these meetings outside of when people know about them, or you whisper about them in circle. What you see here is that people are welcomed. And then the news too had changed, with headlines not blaming mental illness for violence. They traced nuance, invited experts, and emphasized healing. Language evolved. Committed suicide had become died by suicide. Respecting grief without layering guilt. People still struggled in this world, and there is still pain. And I'm only talking about 10 years from now. Depression didn't just vanish. PTSD still showed up in veterans and survivors, but now nobody walked alone. And that was the point. It was a world where people didn't wait until breaking to seek help. As Lori mentioned, there is a time period where you have your own symptoms versus where you actually get your diagnosis. But what we're talking about is a place where healing is collective, where the community didn't judge what it didn't understand. It learned and it listened. And in this world, stigma had no home, and compassion has 1,000 doors. My name is Ryan Williams. I've been a volunteer for NAMI for almost a couple of decades now. I've had a chance to work alongside of NAMI Baltimore, NAMI Maryland as a whole, NAMI Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, Delaware, Northern Virginia. I have been all over the place. I get a chance to not only sit and teach family members who are dealing with mental health, who are dealing with loved ones with mental health conditions, but I also get to deal with consumers like myself. My background is in psychology, and despite the fact that my views are informed by psychology, I'm here today to talk to you about my experience as a person who deals with a mental health condition. If there's any one thing that I would want you guys to know or to understand about myself, it's that despite I have a condition, my condition is not who I am. I am not my condition. My condition doesn't say that, because I have to deal with a mental health condition, or I'm dealing with depression, or I'm dealing with anxiety, that this is who I am. I am depressed. I am anxious all the time. It doesn't take away from me. One of the things that people don't seem to understand is that, a person isn't bipolar, they're dealing with a bipolar disorder. A person isn't schizophrenic, they're dealing with schizophrenia. They're dealing with something that they didn't have a choice in the matter, that they didn't ask to have. And this is the one important things about stigmas that I would like people to learn, because when it comes down to stigma, that's also how we subject a whole another group of people to othering. In psychology, we call it in-group, out-group. In which case, the in-group is the one that's kind of subjecting the out-group to a different view, a different opinion, and looking down on them. But what I want people to understand is that when it comes down to dealing with a mental health condition, people don't have a choice in what's given to them. They didn't go out and sign up for it. They didn't go out and win the lottery on this. It's just happened. When I first was diagnosed with a mental health condition, it came long after signs and symptoms had already appeared. With me, it started when I was a child and I had dealt with multiple forms of abuse, and I had a mother who had a mental health condition, and there were times that she would see things that we couldn't see, she would hear things that we couldn't hear, and she would take it out on us because the voices were telling her to. But my mother was struggling in ways that I couldn't even imagine because she also had a drug problem. My mother would she would do with drugs, and she would take drugs because she wanted to stop the voices that she kept hearing. She didn't have a choice in the matter. And as I grew up, I didn't really understand because we never talked about it in our family. My mother was a veteran, or is a veteran. She used to work for the police department as well. But she didn't have the same supports that they're starting to have now. So my mother ended up on the streets. And her children just kind of went through life cluelessly about what was going on with their mother. Family members didn't talk about it. Members at church didn't talk about it. Friends didn't talk about it. But how much different is it now where we can actually start having some of these conversations in a way that we couldn't have them back then? Now you can actually go to the church and, hey, they're having a mental wellness conference, or they're having a talk about, men's mental health, or they're having different conversations that we couldn't have 30 and 40 years ago. I remember one of the first times at my job that I gave one of these presentations, and I remember looking down from the stage and seeing my managers right there in the front row. They had no idea that I was going to be up there talking because they didn't know that I volunteered with NAMI. But what I didn't understand about them at that time was that they had been touched by mental health conditions as well by way of their loved ones. And so after I gave my talk, I was already up there nervous. They came to me and they were just like, hey, is it okay if we talk? Because I have a stepdaughter. She's been in and out of the hospital and she's dealing with a mental health condition and I don't know what to do. These are people that I work with every day that I had no idea that that's what they were dealing with. But then again, until I spoke, they had no idea what I was dealing with. When I was diagnosed with my mental health condition, it was along the lines of suicidal ideations, depression, anxiety. I was always anxious. I was trying to get myself help and I didn't have the money to. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder only to find out, more than 10 years later that it was a misdiagnosis and what I actually had was autism. That doesn't take away from the part that I still have to deal with depression. I still have to deal with anxiety. It's just that this isn't an exact science. And we are still learning more and more about the brain. Because there's some mental health conditions that are environmental. There are some that are genetic. There are some that they believe that is a disease component to it. But when I was diagnosed, I didn't have the support. I ended up losing my first job because I just wasn't up to it. And then that would happen along the lines where because I couldn't deal with certain things or I avoided conflict, that I was penalized for it. I remember when I had my first child and I lost my first child. I had to bury my first child. It would be somewhere between 7 and 9 months before I actually sought help. And when I did, I was in an intense outpatient program. I was on disability leave for about 3 months, trying to get help for myself because I was dealing with so much grief at that time. I remember sitting in a room with about 20 other people and crying my eyes out because that's what I was dealing with. But that was also the time I was formally diagnosed with anxiety. That world that I was just talking about that could be the place from 10 years from now in 2035, I wish we had that type of environment where I could have just came back and said, you know what? You guys knew I lost my child. I'm dealing with grief. I'm dealing with anxiety. And I would have gotten the support that I needed from my coworkers. That's not what happened. What happened is that everybody tiptoed around all of that. What happened is that one time in a meeting where I didn't want to talk because I was just dealing with so much. It was about a year after my child's death that I'm having a confrontation with one of my coworkers because she wanted me to talk and I didn't feel like talking at the time. And I explained, I don't feel like it. Please skip me and move on to somebody else. And it turned into a whole thing where I was put on the spot despite the fact of letting them know what was going on with me. The type of world that I would love to see sooner than later is where we can have these open conversations. People don't understand, or they try not to understand, that what happens to you outside of work comes with you to work. If you're dealing with a death, it's going to come with you to work. You have no choice over that. If you're dealing with the loss of a loved one, you're dealing with your own mental health struggles, it's going to come with you to work. And it's going to affect your ability to work. It's going to affect the quality of your work. So if we already understand this and that people just can't ignore everything that's going on with them, why can't we just normalize having those conversations so that people don't feel alone while they're at work? Why can't we have those conversations and make it acceptable to take those mental health days? To have those conversations where you can just walk up to your coworker and it's like, is everything okay? Is there anything that I can do to help? Instead of hiding in the shadows and whispering about it behind your back. Why can't we normalize these type of things? Because over the last 20 years, I've seen how things have progressively gotten better. So 2035, what I'm talking about in a stigma-free world, or at least headed towards that direction, isn't here yet. And I would love for it to be here more than anybody, because I would love for that type of support to be there for my children as they grow up and my grandchildren after that. I want to see them in a world in which they're supported. That it's not always about making money and, you know, how much work they can get in a week and how many hours they put in. What I would like to see for them is that they can go to work, and if they're dealing with something, they can say, you know what, I need to step away. I'm not feeling my best and I am struggling. And where HR can say, you know what, here's some resources for you. Here's a number that you can call. Is there anything else that we can do to help? We're not yet in that environment. People dealing with a mental health condition or even a temporary condition, you know, there are three types of disabilities as far as categories. You have those that are permanent, you have those that are situational, and then you have those that are temporary. And this goes through against basically the whole spectrum, whether it's a cognitive disability, whether it's hearing, whether it's visual, whether it's motor. It goes across the whole spectrum. Sometimes people show up to work, they're not dealing with a mental health condition, but they are dealing with depression because of something that may have happened to them. They may be shooken up because of something that was going on and now they're anxious. What I would like to see in this world is a place where somebody like me, who's been diagnosed with a mental health condition, can come in and say, you know what, I've been trying my best this morning. my brain isn't all the way there. I can't process things. There's too much stimulation. I'm having sensory issues. I need to take some time. I don't need to take the day off, but I just need at least an hour or two where I can decompress. And then my manager can be like, you know what? That's okay. That's fine. Do what you need to do. I've been that type of manager with my subordinates because I want them to show up their best, even if they are dealing with something. I can only expect so much from them. One of my coworkers, his wife passed away. And when he returned, I told him, don't worry about assuming his duties right away. I will take over his duties. And that's what I did. I took over his duties, but guess what? So did every last one of my coworkers that came to that meeting. And we kept doing that week after week until he was okay to resume his duties. It didn't give him a chance to do nothing. It just gave him a chance to just slowly get acclimated back to what he was doing because he just dealt with a major loss. I figure that if I'm going to talk about this type of subject matter, that I also need to be the same type of person to lead. And as Lori mentioned, leading with compassion. And that's where I challenge myself to do on a daily basis in dealing with the people that I work with and that I'm around. In what way can I lead with compassion? How can I change the narrative so that my work environment and the people that's around me are in the best shape that they can be at any given time? It's not just about that individual person, but it's about how we all can help collectively. I've dealt with a lot over my career in dealing with my mental health condition. Dealing with losses, dealing with children being in a hospital for a year, coming home, having to be up 24/7 because they're on ventilators and G-tubes and having to listen out for alarms and stuff. And now all those years are behind me and it seems like so far away. But what I can tell you is about that time, which wasn't so long ago. This was less than 10 years ago. I didn't necessarily have the support from my coworkers. I may have had one or two. One of them cooked food for our family for a couple of weeks. And that was about the biggest thing that somebody did for us. But dealing with a mental health condition or dealing with grief or anything, it's not always the casserole meals that you get. It's not like dealing with cancer. And I don't necessarily like to compare those two in those types of terms, but I wanted to compare them in actions. How do people respond when they hear that somebody has cancer versus when somebody has a mental health condition? It's completely different. I don't want to have to lose friends or coworkers or alienate somebody over something that they had no choice over. And this is the same thing for me. I would like to treat people the way that I would be treated. And that golden rule that's you can find in every type of belief system, every religion, that's what I would like to actually see when it comes down to work as well. Because stigma is one of the things that's holding us behind from the progress that we can make. It's keeping us from that vision that I'm having of 2035, where we're having open conversations about how we're feeling and what's going on. My own personal story, I think, pales in comparison to where we can be. I see the struggles that my 21-year-old has had over the last 4 or 5 years dealing with her mental health condition, and the numerous 988 calls that she's had to make while at the house. And her mother and I don't get upset about it. We actually encourage it. If you don't feel safe, call 988. Talk to them. And when the crisis teams show up, we're not freaking out. We're saying, okay, what do you need? And if she says, I need to go to the hospital and they're going to take me, all right, let us know what we can bring you. We don't flip out about that type of stuff because we want to normalize her being well. We want to make sure that she's okay. And we have conversations that if you are having suicidal ideations and you don't feel that you can talk to us at that moment, call 988. Having an open conversation is what's going to change things. But you know what's not okay as of right now? You can't have that same type of conversation at work. If we really care about people and we are really pro-life and everything else that people claim that they are, we should have those type of conversations to be able to save a life, to be able to get the help that somebody needs. Because that is what's going to change our work environments, our work cultures, and how we move forward. So I don't think this vision of 2035 is something that's far off. I think it is something that's pretty close at hand. And the only thing that we need to do is embrace it. That's it for me, and thank you very much for listening.